like to call this meeting of the House Professional Licensure Committee to order. I'm going to go around the room and ask members to introduce themselves this morning, and let's start with Representative Lawrence.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative John Lawrence. I represent the 13th Legislative District, which is southwestern Chester County and a part of Lancaster County.
Good morning, Representative Kurt Sonny. I represent the 4th Legislative District, which is eastern Erie County.
Steve Menser, I represent Lancaster County.
Joe Emmerich, I represent the 137th in Northampton County.
Good morning, Tara Toohill, Luzerne County, 116th.
Good morning, Linda Culver, Northumberland and Snyder counties.
Anita Kulik, 45th District, Allegheny County.
Adam Ravenstall, 20th District, Allegheny County.
Tina Davis, Bucks County.
Good morning, Mike Schlossberg, Lehigh County.
Good morning, Tom Mahaffey, Dauphin County.
Good morning, Todd Polachak, the 144th from Central Bucks County.
Good morning, Harry Reachaw. I'm the Minority Chair. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, members. For the benefit of the audience, there are a number of other committee meetings this morning, so I suspect that members will be coming in and leaving, throughout the course of the informational meeting. As you all know, today's meeting is to focus on House Bill 1802, which amends the professional nursing law pertaining to licensed dietitian nutritionists and their scope of practice. This is a new issue for this committee, and we're looking forward to learning a lot more about the issue and the profession and how this legislation would be impacting the profession of dietitians and nutritionists. At this time, I just turn the mic over to my co-chair, Chairman Readshaw, for brief remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to say again, good morning to everyone, and I appreciate the time involved here as we enter into educational forum. It's always good for the committee members to gain additional knowledge about any particular subject. And so I just would like to thank also those who are going to testify and for everyone to be here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. For those of you who have a packet, we do have a number of remarks in the packet, both of folks who are here today and will be presenting, and a number who were not able to make it but provided written remarks for us to review. And before I introduce our first testifiers, I'd like to briefly recognize the prime sponsor of the legislation, Representative Tom Mahaffey. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by thanking you and Chairman Readshaw for putting together this hearing, staff for working with me through this bill. Nicole, you've been instrumental in this, and I want to thank you so much for helping me. This has been a journey for the last 2 years. We introduced this last year to really just see who and what was needed to make this bill as good as what it is. So I look forward to all the testimony today. I want to say that this is truly a patient protection bill. If we don't have scope of practice, we really don't have a license. And I think that's really what this bill is about, and we want to make sure that we get this done for those that are practicing and making sure that we have the right patient protections in place. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Our first two presenters this morning will be Susan Adams and Meg Monroe, and I'd ask ladies if you're ready to go, find your name card there, and
You can just pull the mic over.
I'd like to recognize Representative Mark Kosick, who has joined us. Good morning. Ladies, when you're ready, feel free to begin. Introduce yourselves and go from there. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Hickernell and esteemed members of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives Professional Licensure Committee. In advance, I thank you for the time you're devoting to this hearing on House Bill 1802, otherwise known as the Dietitian Nutritionist Licensure Bill. My name is Susan Adams, and I am a registered dietitian and licensed dietitian nutritionist in the state of Pennsylvania. I am currently serving as the president of the Pennsylvania Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics for the 1920 year, and I represent 4,276 licensed dietitian nutritionist professionals residing in our great state. On behalf of our members, I'm testifying today to support House Bill 1802, introduced by Representative Thomas Mahaffey, in which updates sections of the professional nursing law pertaining to the registered dietitian nutritionist and certified nutrition specialists who are licensed dietitian nutritionists or LDNs. Currently, the professional nursing law only provides for title protection for licensed dietitian nutritionists. Professionally, I have taught at Philadelphia-based LaSalle University's nutrition program for the past 19 years, focusing on educating nutrition students and interns. Concurrently, I consult with 9 assisted living homes. They're called personal care homes in Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia area. Being a former military spouse for 22 years, I have lived in many areas of the United States practicing dietetics in hospitals and clinics in many states, and served as the corporate dietitian for the Honeywell Corporation in Minneapolis, Minnesota. While my career path is unique to me, most licensed dietitian nutritionists work with nutrition in a variety of nutrition-related fields, and all have been trained to provide medical nutrition therapy, to provide care as part of an interdisciplinary medical team. LDNs work in concerts with physician, nurses, speech pathologists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, and other healthcare providers to deliver quality, cost-effective care to all. In my almost 40-year-old career as a registered dietitian, I have always understood the impact that evidence-based medical nutrition therapy has on the health and well-being of individuals. What is evidence-based medical nutrition therapy, you might be asking yourself? Medical nutrition therapy, or MNT, is the provision of complex nutrition care services provided for the purpose of treatment or management of nutrition-related diseases or medical conditions. Think diabetes, cancer, heart disease, kidney disease, etc., which includes safely determining and recommending nutrient needs of a patient based on an individual assessment of their nutrition status, after taking into consideration the patient's medical diagnosis as determined by their personal physician, laboratory values, anthropometric measurements, medications, and that includes drug and food interaction, diet history, which includes cultural influences and economic status of that individual. Each nutrition assessment is personalized and specific for that individual. A licensed dietitian nutritionist is qualified to recommend the specific diet that would be best for that patient, and those recommendations may include a specific medical diet or specialized intravenous solutions or specialized oral solutions, including tube feedings, based on their specific medical needs. The core purpose of House Bill 1802 is to protect the health and safety of Pennsylvanians by assuring that all providers of MNT meet minimum standards of education, experience, and competency, therefore being able to treat the sickest of the sick patients and patients that need specialized nutrition interventions. These standards currently include a baccalaureate degree and will be upgraded to a master's degree in 2024 and 1,200 hours of practicum experience in all areas of dietetics. Now, research shows that MNT that's provided by qualified nutrition professionals allows patients to live longer and healthier lives, and furthermore saves valuable health care dollars through reduced reliance on medications, fewer hospitalizations, and quicker recovery from medical crises. Pennsylvania residents will benefit from House Bill 1802 as they'll be able to easily identify qualified nutritionists and dietitians that can safely practice MNT. Presently in Pennsylvania, anyone can refer to themselves as a nutritionist or other similar titles, regardless of education, experience, or proven competency. This may cause delays in receiving appropriate advice and care of diet-related diseases, and this potentially causes harm such as malnutrition and the inability to tolerate medical treatment, decreased quality of life, and increased health care costs. House Bill 1802 will correct this problem by designating the scope of practice of those practitioners that hold the dietitian nutritionist license in Pennsylvania, and thus making identification of qualified practitioners an easy process. Just look for the LDN or LN title. Pennsylvania residents that wish to consult professionals such as teachers or health or fitness coaches who provide general nutrition advice, non-medical weight control services, and most basic nutrition wellness services will be able to continue to do so under House Bill 1802. House Bill 1802 actually maintains the viability of providing general nutrition advice as a career option for individuals that provide these services, thus allowing Pennsylvania residents to safely choose effective services by qualified practitioners based on their individual needs. In this way, licensure under House Bill 1802 does not cause job loss. Rather, it designates and protects each practice area by defining that scope of practice of medical nutrition therapy. Finally, House Bill 1802 will streamline the process of obtaining a dietitian nutritionist license by making it quicker and easier for qualified practitioners, especially military members or military spouses. Strong licensure that includes a scope of practice and qualifies professionals to practice medical nutrition therapy based on education and experience criteria helps to build trust and confidence in those receiving care from licensed professionals. On behalf of the 4,276 licensed dietitian nutritionist professionals in Pennsylvania and all the members of the Pennsylvania Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, I urge you to support House Bill 1802 so that the health and welfare of the residents of the state of Pennsylvania will be protected. In closing, I would personally like to thank you for this opportunity to testify and for the committee's time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rowe?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Chairman, thank you for having us. I'm Meg Rowe, a registered dietitian.
Excuse me, could you make sure your mic's on and maybe pull a little bit closer? Thank you very much.
Is this any better? I think I just bought a tool like this for my children for Christmas. Is this better? Or no? No one ever accused me of having a soft voice. Is this working for everyone? Okay, wonderful. Now, can I sit back? Or do I? Okay. All right, we'll start again. Chairman, good morning. Members of the Professional Licensure Committee, you can hear me now. Thanks so much for having us here. I'm Meg Rowe. I'm a registered dietitian. I have a master's degree in nutritional biochemistry, and I'm a native Pennsylvanian. I was born, raised, and mostly educated in our Commonwealth. I've also worked for many facilities in Pennsylvania. I worked for Penn State and Highmark in the Health Matters program. I spent 10 years at the Milton Hershey School working as their nutrition consultant, and actually started my career at Pocono Hospital in East Stroudsburg. Outside of Pennsylvania, I was the director of clinical dietetics at a variety of hospitals and medical centers in New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. In my spare time, I co-authored a textbook, and no, I didn't make any money on it, and was widely quoted in Penn Live and on the Harrisburg Patriot News. Professionally, I've volunteered with Pennsylvania Academy of Nutrition for about 10 years, and in a variety of different roles. I have a very easy job today. Susan had to give all of the background, and we know how boring that is. My job is so easy. I'm going to discuss reimbursement because I know that's something you want to know about. And secondly, I'm going to provide some real-life examples of why this bill is essential. And these examples are from my personal and professional experiences and practice as a dietitian nutritionist who is licensed. Reimbursement is easy. Dietitians are, registered dietitians, licensed dietitians, nutritionists are reimbursed by Medicare, Medicaid, and all of the licensed health insurance companies in Pennsylvania. So reimbursement is not an issue that's germane to the bill because it's already happening. The second thing is I'm going to give you 4 examples of why HB 1802 is so important. My first example, a 60-year-old woman was diagnosed with colon cancer. She heard that she could cure her cancer by starving it. So she went to a nutritionist. And that person actually advertised herself as a cancer nutritionist. The person told her that if she did not eat sugar or consume most carbohydrates in her diet, she could cure her cancer because she told her, you know, cancer cells need sugar in order to live. The woman with the disease did exactly what that nutritionist told her to do, and because of that, lost 25 pounds, developed some medical issues related to the malnutrition. And when her oncologist saw her, he was alarmed. And I'm paraphrasing from what I wrote there. It's essentially the same. He was really alarmed by it and asked her to go see a dietitian. And she said very proudly, she said, well, I'm seeing a nutritionist already. And here's what she told me. And she told the physician. The physician said, that's not the correct advice. In fact, it's wrong. You see, all cells in our bodies require sugar, whether they're healthy or diseased. So by eliminating certain food groups from her diet, she was actually making the cancer worse and also preventing the chemo from working properly. Because she was so debilitated, that woman was never able to resume chemotherapy, and she died 6 months later. A second example involves a 6-week-old baby. He had colic. He was formula fed from birth. The parents were alarmed, and rather than taking the baby to see the pediatrician, they took him to see a natural healer. The natural healer suggested that he, the child, be removed from the formula that he had been on and put on unpasteurized milk. The parents did just that, and within 5 days, the baby developed bloody diarrhea, which resulted in the baby ending up in the emergency room and being admitted to the hospital for dehydration and a very severe gastroenteritis, which was caused by the bacteria in the unpasteurized milk. Fortunately, the medical care at the hospital was good, and the baby survived, and my role was to help refeed that child so he could regain the weight that he had lost. And so I worked with his parents, and I worked with the doctors in order to do that, and we put him on another formula, and it was well tolerated. A third example is a physician diagnosed a 50-year-old woman with basically head and neck cancer. After surgery and during radiation, she had a sore throat, difficulty swallowing, mouth pain, and lost over 10 pounds. Without telling her surgeon, she went to see an unlicensed nutritionist. That person sold her a variety of costly supplements from her office store, And those supplements didn't help. And upon the advice of the nutritionist, the patient also stopped taking the medications that were prescribed by the physician. The patient lost more weight and eventually went back to see her surgeon, who said, "We have to put a feeding tube in your stomach because we have to get some nourishment back in your body." So he placed a feeding tube for calories and nutrition. Had this patient known that nutritionist is a title that anyone in Pennsylvania can use, regardless of education, experience, or any ability, she might have been able to save herself the difficulty of dealing with the weight loss, the poor healing, and also then a tube feeding on top of it all. And then a fourth example is a patient came into my office a couple of years ago, and rather than sitting down, he stood by the door, and he said, just like that, on the door, and said, "I have 2 questions to ask you." And I said, "Okay, ask." And he said, "Can I have a Starbucks latte, and can I eat the food at the Giant Center for the Hershey Bears games?" And I looked and I said, "Sure, we can work through that." And so he did eventually come and sit down, and I said, "Why did you ask those questions?" And he said, "Well, honestly, I'd seen a nutritionist a few weeks ago, and she gave me a list of foods that she said all I had to do is stay away from these foods." And he said, "I did." But unfortunately, that advice was wrong, because he ended up in the hospital in diabetic ketoacidosis or a diabetic coma. He could have died because of the poor advice that was provided by an unlicensed, unqualified person. The good news is the man survived, he's doing well, and he's keeping his blood sugar in check. I spent a good amount of time working with him on planning a diet that he could live with, that included a latte, that included some of the pretzels with the liquid cheese over at the Giant Center sort of thing. Because as a registered dietitian who's proficient in medical nutrition therapy, we have to start where the patient's at, for what the patient needs. And that's the way we function. It's very individualized, and we were able to take the scientific information and convert it into food so it makes sense to the patient. Let me flip my page here. These 4 are prime examples of why we have to take steps to protect the residents who honestly believe that a nutritionist is a legal term that means a person is qualified to provide complex nutrition information and medical nutrition therapy and provide disease-specific nutrition advice to patients. The woman with colon cancer died prematurely because a nutritionist advice starved her. The baby had a GI bleed due to the advice of the natural healer. The nutritionist sold pills to the woman with the neck cancer that were ineffective. And finally, the gentleman with diabetes could have died, but fortunately did not because of bad advice. Pennsylvanians are bombarded, and I'm sure you are in your own lives, by contradictory and confusing messages about nutrition for disease treatment. Making it even worse, many folks believe that a nutritionist title is one that designates a person as an expert. Your support of HB 1802 will guarantee that Pennsylvanians with nutrition-related diseases will receive the nutrition care services they need, they deserve, and they expect to treat or manage their diseases, because the Commonwealth mandates that these complex nutrition care services are delivered by licensed dietitians, nutritionists, and licensed nutritionists that have the training and education needed to deliver them safely and effectively. My personal thanks to each of you with best wishes, and I do appreciate everything you do to protect the citizens, the residents of Pennsylvania from nutritional fraud, abuse, and harm. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. What we'd like to do this morning is hold our questions until we hear from all of our presenters. Are you available to stay for the remainder of the informational meeting?
Of course.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to recognize 4 other members who've joined us: Representative Thomas, Representative Mullins, Representative Day, and Representative Brown. And with that, I'd like to ask our next presenter, Acting Commissioner of the Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs, Kalonji Johnson, to come to the microphone. Morning, Kalonji.
Good morning, Chairman.
How are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for being here. And, sir, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Again, good morning, and thank you, Chairman Hickernell, Chair Reed Shaw, and members of this esteemed Professional Licensure Committee for allowing the Department of State to submit written comments for today's meeting. As many of you are aware, the Department, through its Bureau of Professional Occupations and Affairs, administers and enforces practice requirements for the professional licensure of 29 professional boards and commissions, and nearly 750,000 licensees. The Bureau was established nearly 50 years ago as part of the Department to provide administrative, logistical, and legal support services to the boards and commissions. The licensee classes regulated by each board and commission vary significantly. Looking at the healthcare field, for example, the Pennsylvania Board of Nursing oversees the Commonwealth's largest professional licensee class, with a combined active count of almost 300,000 registered nurses, certified registered nurse practitioners, licensed practical nurses, clinical nurse specialists, and licensed dietitian nutritionists. Contrast that with our smallest, the Navigation Commission for the Delaware River and its navigable tributaries, that licenses just 42 maritime pilots, excuse me. In contrast, the Pennsylvania State Board of Medicine, respectively, is responsible for the oversight of just over 98,000 active licensees across 36 different occupational classes. In total, the Health Licensing Division of BPOA alone regulates over 322,000 licensees. So you can see the Board of Nursing roughly 3-to-1 to the Board of Medicine. Each board and commission, as a creature of statute, is governed by its Practice Act, establishing the scope of its powers and duties, defining the practice of its profession, and setting forth the types of licenses which it may grant. These statutes also mandate the training, education, and other requirements under which a board may grant those licenses, and sets forth the standards of conduct to which a person or entity, once licensed, must adhere in order to protect public health, safety, and well-being. Additionally, BPOA is responsible for the discipline and enforcement of those standards of conduct as promulgated by the respective board. I won't belabor the points in my written testimony, but I would just like to say, when implemented properly, occupational licensing helps protect the health and safety of consumers by requiring practitioners to undergo a designated amount of training and education in their field. What may appear to some as barriers are actually vital requirements that have been developed, adopted, and instituted for the benefit of all the citizens of this Commonwealth. Green light designates on, I'm assuming? Okay. Okay, I must have to speak louder. Licensed dietitian nutritionist, is that better? I apologize. Licensed dietitian nutritionists, or LDNs, were created in 2002 when the professional nursing law was amended to include this occupational class. Today, we license roughly just under 4,500 LDNs across the Commonwealth. Following Governor Wolf's executive order of 2017, the department now requires a favorable sunrise analysis prior to supporting any new licensure. A sunrise analysis is completed by the party advocating for new licensure and provides the department with a full picture of the extent of the members of the public advocating for licensure, the scope of the public that would be regulated by licensure or affected by licensure, threats to public health and safety that would result from a lack of licensure, the functions performed by the occupation or profession to be licensed, identifying the differences from current licenses that exist, a description of the public need for this licensure, the impact that licensure would have on existing practitioners, the change in costs of services to the public upon licensure, how any prospective legislation would affect or be affected by current statute, the minimum education requirements and where education is offered, the existence of private organizations that set standards for practice, the estimated cost to the department for licensure, and any possible alternatives to licensure. Now, as it pertains to House Bill 1802, the department and the Bureau initially believed that a sunrise analysis was not necessary because LDNs are already covered by the professional nursing law. However, upon further examination and discussion, it has become clear that a sunrise analysis is necessary. In its current form, House Bill 1802 substantively alters the current licensing structure for LDNs and leaves open many of the questions that a sunrise analysis would effectively answer. Among the changes that the department and the Bureau need more information about include ambiguous, vague, or otherwise confusing language within the bill, the cost of licensure, the scope of the public that would be subject to licensure, the unintended consequences that this bill would have on other licensure classes, and how this bill would be reconciled with Act 41 of 2019. The department would be happy to work with proponents of the bill to complete a sunrise analysis and to expedite that evaluation. While a completed sunrise analysis is not a guarantee of support for a new licensure class, the department is unable to provide a position for this legislation until one is completed. And with that, I would conclude my testimony today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are you available to stay until the end of the hearing for questions?
Absolutely.
I know you're a busy guy, but if you're willing to do that, thank you very much.
Always make time for this committee.
Thank you, sir. Our next presenter this morning is Brett Ewer. Excuse me if I mispronounced your name. I get that all the time.
First time. Wow.
Okay.
Thank you.
She helped me, actually. Good morning, Brett. Brett is a government relations specialist with CrossFit Incorporated, and you may begin when you're ready, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you for allowing me to speak before you today. My name is Brett Ewer, and I speak on behalf of CrossFit Inc., the largest gym chain in the world, and the largest in the Commonwealth, with more than 220 affiliated gyms. These gyms are independently owned and operated, local small businesses, and they improve the health and fitness of thousands of Pennsylvanians every day. They are on the front lines of the chronic disease crisis, helping their clients with diabetes, obesity, and heart disease live healthy lives. They change lives every day through their positive social reinforcement. I speak in opposition to House Bill 1802 because, as written, it would enact harmful public policy, though I believe it was introduced with the best of intentions. But ultimately, it would prevent our trainers from speaking about proper nutrition with their clients. Trainers could, simply by helping some of their clients address their obesity and become healthier, face legal penalties for providing medical nutrition therapy, a phrase we're all now familiar with. The bill prohibits the unlicensed practice of medical nutrition therapy and defines it as the provision of nutrition care services for the purpose of treatment or management of a disease or medical condition. In turn, nutrition care services includes establishing priorities, goals, and objectives that meet nutritional needs. The American Medical Association, among other medical professional associations, recognizes that obesity is a disease. So if House Bill 1802 were enacted in its current form, our trainers would not be able to provide simple nutrition-related services, such as a meal diary, to their clients with obesity. By doing so, they could be considered as practicing medical nutrition therapy and would be subject to penalty. This definition of medical nutrition therapy is exceedingly broad. Neighboring and similar states, such as New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, do not have as expansive definitions, nor the similar scope exclusivity that would be established by the bill. Proponents have claimed that this bill is necessary to protect consumers, even though there is no substantive, large-scale evidence to suggest that this is a pressing public need. And assuming that the proposed level of regulation is preventative, the scope of practice the bill would establish far exceeds that which is found in neighboring jurisdictions and that which is reasonable. The current definition of medical nutrition therapy also conflicts with the federal definition of medical nutrition therapy, which is nutritional diagnostic, therapeutic, and counseling services provided by a registered dietitian or nutrition professional for the purpose of managing diabetes or a renal disease. Even more confusing is that the bill's current definition is not even in accordance with the definition the bill's primary supporters advertise. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics definition of medical nutrition therapy is nutritional diagnostic therapy and counseling services for the purpose of disease management, which are furnished by a registered dietitian or nutrition professional. The ultimate effect of retaining the existing definition of medical nutrition therapy would be to privilege one profession, dietitians, over all others. Dietitians are certainly not the end-all, be-all of people who improve others' health by homing in on nutrition. As you know well in this committee, they exist within an ecosystem of different professions which make people healthier. Our trainers improve the health of their clients, and they do so at a time when nearly 1 out of 3 adults in Pennsylvania is obese. Now is the time for more people to be talking about proper nutrition, not fewer. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to address you today, and I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are you also able to stay until the end of the...
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our final presenter this morning is Brittany Dawn Mcallister, Director of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs with the American Nutrition Association. Good morning, Brittany.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. And you may begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brittany Mcallister, and I'm here today on behalf of the American Nutrition Association, where I serve as the Director of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs. I'm pleased to share background information with you to use as you consider House Bill 1802, which would change the nature of nutrition licensure in Pennsylvania. The ANA's Board for Certification of Nutrition Specialists, or BCNS, is the foremost certifying body for advanced degreed nutrition professionals. BCNS's certificates, Certified Nutrition Specialists, or CNSs, hold an advanced degree in nutrition or clinical health care, complete a robust nutrition science curriculum, perform 1,000 hours of documented nutrition practice experience, and pass a rigorous certification exam. Medical nutrition therapy, or MNT, is a significant portion of the training of CNSs. It is a competency that is addressed during their academic training and supervised practice experience and is tested during the certification exam. The CNS credential is the most advanced certification for personalized nutrition practitioners. After becoming a CNS, BCNS ensures practitioners continue to advance their knowledge and hone their skills by requiring that they renew certification with 75 continuing education hours every 5 years. The CNS certification is fully accredited by the National Commission for Certifying Agencies, the preeminent accrediting organization for certifying programs, and the same accreditation held by the Registered Dietitian or RD credential. The CNS certification is also listed by the U.S. Department of Labor as an advanced nutrition credential in the definition of dietitians and nutritionists in the Occupational Outlook Handbook of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. CNSs are currently eligible to apply for licensed dietitian nutritionist, or LDN licensure in Pennsylvania by virtue of their education, supervised practice experience, and passage of the aforementioned exam. Registered dietitians, or RDs, are also eligible for the same license. HB 1802 would change the current framework, creating the licensed nutritionist, or LN licensure, for CNSs and other advanced nutritionists, and maintaining the licensed dietitian nutritionist license for RDs. We are hopeful that an amendment will be proposed which would allow CNSs who are currently licensed as LDNs to maintain that title in addition to the proposed framework. Both the current and proposed licensure frameworks would continue to have the same overall scope of practice for both licensees. The most significant change this bill would make is changing the completely optional licensure offered by the state right now to a license that is mandatory for the practice of medical nutrition therapy. Accordingly, this bill would continue to ensure that individuals with varied levels of training can practice in Pennsylvania. Practitioners with training and credentials that do not meet the criteria for licensure will still be able to practice individualized nutrition counseling that does not target a medical condition. This bill will also ensure that LNs and LDNs are authorized to provide telehealth services in the Commonwealth, enabling important virtual delivery of nutrition counseling. Certified nutrition specialists engage in science-based, advanced nutrition practice, incorporating the rapidly evolving science of nutrition and applying it to every aspect of health to support optimal functioning of every body system. Across many of the services they provide, CNSs obtain health histories, conduct health, lifestyle, and nutrition assessments, order and evaluate laboratory tests, and provide individualized nutrition counseling and MNT. In providing MNT, CNSs help target diagnosed diseases or conditions and work with individuals to develop nutrition plans that can help slow, manage, or even reverse certain diseases and conditions. By targeting underlying physiological systems through nutrition, CNSs help alter physiological imbalances that are at the root of or the result of many diseases. CNSs work with clients of all ages and from all walks of life. They may serve pediatric, adult, or geriatric clients, providing individualized or group nutrition counseling to patients, families, and community groups to help them become or stay healthy. Nearly 70% of CNSs provide advanced clinical nutrition services in clinical care practice settings, such as group nutrition practices in private practice, and as part of coordinated care clinics with physicians and other healthcare practitioners to provide nutrition therapy to patients being treated by a set of coordinated disciplines. Approximately 12% of CNSs work in or with institutional facilities such as hospitals, nursing homes, and long-term care facilities. Other CNSs work in universities and school settings, for corporations, in consulting, and other roles. Based on the results of a 2019 job analysis survey of CNSs, some of the more common conditions they provide MNT for are allergies and immune disorders, cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. Here in Pennsylvania, this is also an accurate representation of frequent conditions and types of services CNSs offer. In addition, some CNSs offer nutrition counseling and therapy for gastrointestinal issues, women's health issues, depression, anxiety and mood disorders, infertility, and more. There are CNSs practicing all across Pennsylvania, from Erie to Pittsburgh to here in Harrisburg to Philadelphia. Some of them have joined us here today, and I'd like to share with you just a brief snapshot of some of the fantastic work a few of these CNSs are doing. Gail Leigeber joins us from Harleysville and has graduate training in both food science and nutrition, as well as Spanish, and has lived and worked in various parts of the country, and along the way has helped people with diverse backgrounds with diet and nutrition-related choices and needs. She focuses today on the forefront of personalized nutrition research, helping people, educating people to seek choices in food and nutrition based on their own individual needs. Melissa Tweet is an LDN from Wayne who has successfully helped clients dealing with thyroid and other autoimmune conditions such as Hashimoto's. And Erin Orikar is an LDN who works at Advent Nutrition, offering nutrition services for a variety of health issues such as obesity, metabolic syndrome, gastrointestinal health, and autoimmune conditions. While there's both overlap and distinction in the training and education that lead to the respective credentials, both CNSs and RDs are largely prepared for the same scope of practice. The minimum level degree for the RD credential is currently a bachelor's degree, compared to a master's degree minimum for the CNS credential. The RD training pathway focuses largely on food service management and population-based nutrition, and focuses more on institutional settings than private practice. Consequently, over half of dietitians report working in institutional settings and food service management, compared to CNS training, which focuses heavily on nutrition science, biochemistry, and metabolic pathways to understand how the food we eat affects the way our bodies function. The majority of our practitioners work directly with clients providing advanced, personalized nutrition. Both RDs and CNSs, as well as others who provide nutrition services, have a key role to play in stemming our society's crisis of chronic disease and obesity. Poor nutrition is the leading cause of chronic disease and obesity. It is responsible for more deaths than tobacco, inactivity, or any other risk factor. Access to health coaching, individualized nutrition counseling, and MNT is key to reducing these health burdens on Americans and our economy. While we appreciate the interest in updating licensure in Pennsylvania, the bill does contain a few outstanding errors that, if uncorrected, would lead to unnecessary restrictions and difficulties obtaining licensure for CNSs and other qualified nutrition professionals. Accordingly, we are requesting several friendly amendments to clarify these outstanding issues, including the assurance that data collection is not the same as nutrition assessment, the assurance that trainees can continue their supervised practice experience after graduating from their educational programs, The assurance that supervisors of trainees need only be licensed in the Commonwealth for MNT delivered to Pennsylvania residents, not for care delivered virtually to clients in other states. The assurance that individuals licensed in other states will have greater licensure portability if the state standards are substantially equivalent to Pennsylvania's, which is incredibly important for military spouses especially. The assurance that CNSs and others currently licensed as LDNs will not lose their title if this bill passes. And finally, because licensure for any aspect of nutrition care has to date been entirely optional, a grandfathering period for individuals who meet the current licensure qualifications to become eligible for licensure within 1 year of this bill passing. The American Clinical Board of Nutrition, another nutrition certification entity which certifies the other advanced nutritionists who would be eligible for licensure under this bill, also supports and requests these changes. We hope that the committee will consider adopting these amendments before advancing the bill. I'm happy to take any questions whenever we're ready, since I'm the last person. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us and for your presentation. Since Brittany is the last presenter this morning, you can remain where you are, and I'd ask Meg, Susan, Kalonji, and Brett to please come forward and find a spot there at the end, if you would, and we'll start firing questions at you. You want to write down who's... Before I turn it over to my counterpart here to my left, I would just like to ask Commissioner Johnson, with regard to the sunrise evaluation, how long, if there is a typical time period, how long does a sunrise evaluation typically take, from the time the Bureau would receive that until you would, respond back to the organization?
Sure, Chairman, and I apologize if I sound like I'm shouting, but we typically... Thank you. We typically can get back, I will preface by saying it will depend largely on the information that we receive, for one. So we cannot conduct the actual evaluation until the evaluation is completed. So that determination is largely left up to the proponents for licensure. Once we have a completed sunrise application in our midst, within a matter of weeks, we should be able to have an initial. So let me start by saying the sunrise process consists of the reach out from the initial proponents to the department, the submittal of the application. We then have an initial review of the application by our policy department. Then we meet in committee, which consists of our policy, legislative affairs, Office of Chief Counsel, myself, and our Deputy Secretary of Regulatory Programs. We convene after having reviewed the application. We provide input from our program areas as well. I'm sorry, I did not add them initially. We convene, we discuss, we then prepare a final report that goes to our secretary. After her review, she then submits the formal position up to the governor's office, where it essentially sits. So right now we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks from the time that the application is submitted to us to a formal position.
Okay, thank you. And I probably should know this as chair, but I don't. Does the sunrise, when you actually provide your report or whatever it is, does it actually say in that sunrise evaluation if the administration supports or opposes the legislation that you've done the evaluation on?
So again, it depends on the subject of the sunrise. It's usually related to the scope of licensure. It's usually related to a new licensure class or a scope of an expansion of the scope of licensure. Again, we have another formal process for bill analysis that we do that's relatively the same, but within the confines of that expansion of licensure, yes, we provide a formal administrative position that is vetted by Governor's Office of Policy and the Governor's Office. So yes, it is the voice of the administration.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Chairman Reedshaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions, with your indulgence. One is for Susan. I want to pass on our thanks for your husband serving in the military, and also I know it's difficult at times to be a military spouse. So my question does have to do in regards to the military. You had obviously mentioned that your military connections, and do you have any data on how many current dietitians or nutritionists are military or military spouses since we introduced license portability? Has there been any tracking of that?
Sir, are you asking in Pennsylvania or in the whole nation?
Either or, any data that you might have.
I don't have any specific data. However, I would think that the states that have the most military bases would have the most military spouses or military members. We have registered dietitian nutritionists that are military members and associated with actually every branch of the United States Armed Forces. In particular, my husband was a Coast Guard officer for 33 years. And however, that doesn't really matter in that I was always able to I always knew that there were military members that spouses and members that were registered dietitians. As far as the specific number, I do not know, but I can get that information for you.
Okay, I would be curious to know that, so if you can provide that information in the future, it'd be greatly appreciated.
I will certainly work on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next question for Meg, you in your testimony made mention of a feeding tube, and could you give us a hypothetical how that would work? My question is, I am interested, is that a unilateral decision? You consulting with obviously a physician prior to that being established? Could you give us some information on how that action is accomplished?
Certainly. Yes, thank you. Do you want the mechanism of the feeding tube insertion or just the interaction with the physicians?
Well, the assumption that a feeding tube is needed is in consultation with a physician, just the process with which that would work.
Okay. Although there's some variability in the process, it has the following elements. First of all, the dietitian does a nutritional assessment of the patient, which includes weight, height, changes in weight, prior food intake, issues related to present food intake, and comes up with a plan of action, presents that to the physician. The physician is the person at this point in time that would be ordering the enteral nutrition for the feeding. The feeding tube, to the best of my knowledge, and my colleagues from nursing may be able to help a little bit more, but to the best of my knowledge, in Pennsylvania, the feeding tubes are inserted by physicians or physician extenders, meaning nurse practitioners, PAs, and that sort of person, and that sort of profession, I'm sorry. And then the feeding formula is determined basically by the dietitian. Because the dietitian is the person that is able to do the caloric and the protein and the micronutrient need assessment and then it's fed in based on the patient's total caloric needs. Does that answer your question, or do you need more detail?
Yes, I was under the assumption that obviously you would have to consult with a physician when this process, this action took place, but I just wanted to get overall how that came to be with you consulting with a physician. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I do have other questions, but in the sake of time, when we go into voting session at 11 o'clock, I will end my questioning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Emmerich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for my own understanding, Ms. Adams, can I just ask you this? Your testimony, you said this bill updates sections of the professional nursing law pertaining to registered dietitian, nutritionists, and certified nutrition specialists who are licensed dietitian, nutritionists, or LDNs. Currently, these are the only license provided. So if they're licensed already, what exactly does this bill do? Who does it expand licensure to? Does it expand definitions? Does it expand scope of practice? All of the above? Like what's the, if they're licensed already, what's the goal here?
We are currently licensed. I personally hold an LDN license in the state of Pennsylvania. And that's basically a Title Act. And what it means in Pennsylvania currently is that no one else, unless they hold a licensed dietitian nutritionist license, can call themselves an LDN.
So it's just a title protection?
It's just title protection for that very narrow scope of licensed dietitian nutritionist. So anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. Honestly, your next door neighbor that read an article on nutrition could call themselves a nutritionist. But they could not currently call themselves a licensed dietitian nutritionist because that particular narrow title is protected. What we want more than anything is to have a scope of practice. And that scope of practice is detailed in our in-house bill 1802. And that scope of practice is what will protect the residents of Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that explanation. So my next question, I'm not sure who, maybe the prime sponsor, maybe somebody on the panel. So to Mr. Ewer, your points about your opposition to the bill. So I have a really good friend who I grew up with, Chris Pagato. Great friend, right? Known him since elementary school. Incredibly smart guy, self-taught with a lot of nutritional things. He was a wrestler, extensive background in mixed martial arts, etc. So he helped me clean my diet in an incredible way, where I lost almost 20 pounds, changed a lot of things, and it was about, you know, very high proteins, very low fat, very low sodium, very low sugar. And I had incredible results. So if this bill becomes law, would his advice to me or anybody else become illegal? Or would he be subject to penalty, or what? And if so, what would that penalty be? So I'm just trying to understand, like, what would happen.
We are so appreciative that you asked that specific question. Your friend would suffer no consequences whatsoever. We have specifically carved out in the bill the provision of general non-medical nutrition therapy or education or counseling or services or whatever we want to call it, so that people that are not eligible for licensure and not desiring to become licensed can still practice as CrossFit trainers as long as they're doing non-medical nutrition services, as wellness coaches, as friends in the neighborhood, as people that work out at the gyms. Doesn't matter. They can do that. We're not taking jobs away. And as Susan mentioned, it actually creates more of a niche in the general non-medical because it's been acknowledged statutorily so that these people can say, I can do this, which no one can say anything at this point in time because of the way the bill was written 17 years ago. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's the nutritional treatment of diseases.
Okay.
Because that needs educational background far exceeding what most people have.
So it's for, as you just said, it's for nutritional, treating diseases through nutrition. Now, he's not going around parading as a nutritionist or a dietitian.
right.
He's never said that, never. Okay.
Yeah.
And I also go to a cross-training gym for a number of years. And very small, it's a guy and his wife. They're young, startup business, doing a great job. And they will also provide, this naturally comes up in conversation about diet and food and intake and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, again, never has claimed to be a dietitian, nutritionist. Right? So
Right.
you're looking for clear definitions, scope of practice, and specifically to treat
Diseases.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Ure, do you have I'd like to hear your take on it.
But here's the rub, is that there's an ever-expanding definition of disease. So at one point, obesity was not considered a disease. It was considered something else. I tend to view it as being something that is related to lifestyle, not explicitly and not exclusively, but there are a sort of tranching category of diseases or disorders which are related to lifestyle and which respond better on a population-wide scale to lifestyle improvement or lifestyle changes. So the gym that you go to, if it's a CrossFit branded gym or just uses high-intensity interval training, I won't ask, but
I probably couldn't answer that anyway.
But to your point, if you were obese, if you had a BMI over 30, or if your body fat percentage was a certain level, or if you satisfied other criteria that are used to determine whether someone is obese, then he could be subject to penalty. And he could be subject to penalty. I'm not sure how it works necessarily in Pennsylvania, but I know that in other states, there is the board has the authority to issue fines itself. In other states, they refer it to a district attorney for criminal prosecution. Again, I'm not sure how it works in Pennsylvania, but he could potentially face a legal penalty. It just depends on your particular makeup.
Okay.
Sir, would you mind if I just commented? Because I do want to correct what he said.
Well, that's up to the chairman.
I apologize. This is an important point that you raised, and your information I get completely. But what Brett is probably not aware of is that we have an amendment to the bill that's going to handle this particular issue, so that the medical weight loss and the weight loss centers and the people that are providing basically general non-medical nutrition information to people, they are not going to have any difficulty. I don't know how many people listen to Nadia from Trimline on the radio or are familiar with her work. No issue whatsoever. Dr. Costa does weight clinics. No issue whatsoever. That's not something we want to really, really worry about. And so I just want to reassure you and thank you for that question because it's an important one. Thank you.
Great. It's very helpful.
I do appreciate that, though I would say that weight is just one element that should be considered. There are other criteria that could lead to someone being considered obese, too, as I'm sure you know. That weight is not necessarily the most perfect way of evaluating that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank each of you for being here today. I'm sure many of you would prefer to be just about anywhere else other than sitting here in this room in front of the Pennsylvania Capitol, in the Capitol. I appreciate you making time to be here. And I appreciate the intent of this bill, and I actually think it's an important bill. One of the things that was said during the testimony was, this will guarantee a certain level of service. I wish that were the case. I can think of a lot of things, nutritional supplements and things that, people put forward. There have been hucksters since day one, and there will always be. and I could go on about that for a long time, but I'll try to keep this brief. I do think, so I think there's a difference here, right? I think everyone in the room would agree that determining the nutritional mix that goes into a feeding tube that's going into, a premature baby is one thing, and me saying to Representative Menser, hey, cut down on the donuts, or actually he probably would say it to me, cut down on the donuts, that's different, but he is giving me advice that has to do with, and obesity is not the only, alcoholism is a disease, right? Quit drinking. Is that medical advice? Now, I look in this bill, and on page 13, line 13, nothing in this act shall be construed to prohibit this, an individual who does not hold himself or herself out to be a licensed dietitian from furnishing or explaining general non-medical nutrition information. So that's kind of what I think you were getting at, that, well, look, if Representative Menser tells me to cut down on the donuts, he's just giving me general non-medical nutrition information. But then when you go and look at the definition of that, which is on page 4, general non-medical nutrition information is, and then it goes on, it's actually pretty extensive.
Yeah.
Food that should be included in a normal daily diet, recommended amounts of essential nutrients in the human body, effects or deficiencies of excess. I mean, it's broad. But then if you go on and look at things that are specifically, you can only do this kind of thing if you're licensed under this bill, like on page 6, line 4, only only someone with a license can provide nutritional counseling regarding health. That's broad. Page 7, line 15, dietary and nutritional counseling and education, including counseling and education regarding food. So if Representative Menser says cut down on the donuts, that might be okay, but if he says, let me tell you why you should cut down on the donuts, it might not be okay. I guess and I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, the reason I'm going down all these thoughts is this, is that our job in this room is to try to decide where is the line, right? That's really what we're trying to get to, I think. And I don't think nutritional treatment of a disease, I think that was kind of the standard that was put forward there. I don't know that that's the line because, again, a comment about, again, I use the premature baby versus the advice, that you might be giving to someone who comes into the gym or someone who comes in, to a non-medical setting and, advice is given. And it's not terribly, I think, dissimilar from financial advice, right? When I was a kid, my father made me suffer watching Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser. Oh my goodness, as a kid, anything but this, Dad, please. And they used to give very freely, I remember, because I had to sit there and watch it as a kid. They told, buy this, sell this, they were giving financial advice that today, that is not allowed, right? You couldn't run that TV show today without 1,000 disclaimers that would take up 28 of the 30 minutes, right? So that speech is regulated very carefully. I kind of see that this is a similar issue. So I apologize for going on for a long time, but these definitions, there are some other definitions that I'd rather talk about offline that I think have serious issues. But where is the line? I'd like to hear from the nutritionists, from the gym owner. Where do you think the line should be?
Can I start there?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Representative. So the definitions that you cite as maybe problematic are within the definition of nutrition care services, which is not exclusive to licensees. as well as the definition of practice of dietetics and nutrition. So this bill creates a large scope of practice for licensees. However, it only maintains part of that as exclusive, the part that is medical nutrition therapy. So while the definitions that you cited are quite broad, they're not limited to being provided just by licensees. Any other individual, as long as it wasn't treating a medical condition, could also perform those same services.
Then why even include it then?
I think it's necessary to define what licensees do for the sake of making sure that employers are aware who they're hiring, for the sake of making sure that the licensure board knows the entire scope of services that the licensees provide and regulate.
I mean, that's very interesting. I mean, you know, my father was a dentist, and when he wasn't, he was the dentist, and my mom was the receptionist. That was the whole operation. So when he was done for the day, he cleaned the floors too. But it wasn't in his scope of practice in the Pennsylvania dental law that he could clean floors, right? He just, I mean, he can drill teeth. He could, you see what I'm saying? Sure. I think that's very interesting that we would include in a licensure bill a variety of things that, you know, you can also do this too, but it's not exclusively your scope of practice. That's interesting.
Brittany, thank you. She did a good job explaining that. And a lot of these definitions were in the present bill, or in our present statute, and we left them alone. And secondly, we felt that it was important to, as Brittany said, define what the scope of practice is, because it's what registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified nutrition specialists can do is completely different from what an employee in a gym can do. We can do the medical part of the treatment of patients. And the way that I look at it for that line of demarcation is you can talk about fiber, you can talk about fat, you can talk about carbohydrate, you can talk about anything you want to. You can sell anything you want to, because whether or not we agree with that, that's not an issue that we have any control over. You can have patients, you can tell people to eat, drink, be married, whatever you want to do. But once you say, by the way, that fiber is really important for diverticulitis, you've crossed the line, because you're using that particular nutrient class for medical nutrition therapy.
So I'm not disagreeing with you. I think you're right. But wouldn't the same thing be, you shouldn't eat that donut because it'll make you fat? Isn't that the same statement?
And you can say that also, because that's not treating a disease.
But that donut will make you obese.
I think there's a difference in prevention versus treating an existing disease. Maybe that's important for
So
this as well.
stop eating donuts and you won't be so obese.
Is perhaps different than...
That's what?
That would be perhaps different than saying, let's prevent obesity by cutting down on the donuts.
Correct. And we've allowed prevention to be used by people that are not licensed as LDNs and LNs, because we agree that there's a space for people like Brett's group of people in gyms that really, you know, they do very good work, but they do really good work in a particular area, and nutrition or medical nutrition therapy is not the area that they do good work in.
And I don't want to belabor the point, and I'm sure there's other members who have questions as well. But I mean, again, I think this definition is very important, and we need to get it right. I mean, if I came into the CrossFit gym and he said, "Hey, do you smoke?" And I go, "Yeah, I smoke 3 packs a day." And he says, "Well, quitting smoking can reduce your risk of lung cancer." Mm-hmm. Chewing tobacco, right? I mean, is that nutritional advice under the bill or not? I see some folks shaking their head. Again, I do think the moving forward with the licensure is probably a good idea. I just think we need to make sure that our definitions are tight. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for this format. I think it's more efficient to have everybody testify, and then I have a few comments for everybody's comments, what you said, and then a question at the end. Going after everyone else, some of these comments and questions were answered along the way, so I tried to re-edit it for efficiency. But the first thing I want to say is you all did an outstanding job representing the group and agency. This is the way it's supposed to work in the legislature, and I want to thank our team, both chairman and their team, for making sure to put together this hearing. But I do want to say, Ms. Rowe, you made an outstanding case for licensure. You know, the chance of us doing this is based on the petitioner, right, making the case. And it's probably because I see you're a chair of licensure, so you understand that there's a public safety component with licensure, there's a minimum standards component, and there's also, our acting commissioner talked about the sunrise analysis, which the point I wanted to make about your comments, a couple things. Number one, would you please provide, I try to write down everything, functions, differences, public need, change of something, ledge something. Could you provide that list to our team, to our staff, and also the forms? The key point I want to raise and just underline is you don't do the petition, you do the analysis of a petition, and you specifically said it's on the burden of the people who want the licensure to give you all of that information. So I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that, and we know we're aware of that, but that's an important component for any quick review, is that the application is there. So I just wanted to make that point. Ms. Rowe, you really did an outstanding job presenting. Mr., how did you pronounce that? Ewer? Ewer. I got it right.
Thank you.
Before I said it loud. You made very reasonable suggestions. Two of my colleagues talked about the value of the people that you represent, and I would call it a force multiplier of what you're trying to do. They can be an incredible force multiplier to achieve what you're trying to do. And I think we need to, I'd like you to continue to not just, you can oppose if it's not, there yet for legislation or for licensure, but continue to work with carving out a spot for your people. And I agree with my colleague here that I think we have to go toward licensure, but I see a real power. What we're dealing with here, I've done what Representative Emmerich talked about as well, and depending on the patient and what their issues are, it can be an incredibly serious condition, much more than some of the, witch doctor stories that you talked about earlier. Much more of somebody just trying to do what Joe was talking about, but not realizing they had a certain condition, not having an educated person with possibly continuing education and other things from industry to lean on to identify that and save somebody before certain things can actually manifest. So there are dangers that maybe your trainers would not want to be messing around with, right? Messing with ketoacidosis and the keto and measuring that stuff is really serious business and for people. So the third thing, Ms. Mcallister, I think you touched on, you said something in your comments and I don't know if it was exactly, but you said they can practice already, they can practice now, they'll be able to practice under the So you were kind of making comments towards what I'm talking about, a place for everybody to make it a really strong system. And so that brings me to my question. Ms. Rowe, I'll ask you, and anyone is free to comment as well. Do you think there's a way to, and I think you've kind of answered this a little bit, but the question that I want to answer before we put this into law is there a way to create that scope of practice, that triage beginning part that our CrossFit trainers can provide to the masses of getting people healthy, that seek it out and reach out there, and then know when to escalate and say, I think we need to bring in, and I think CrossFit can have, consortiums of one licensed person for multiple facilities and things like that. So do you think we can establish that scope of practice that brings all forces to bear.
Well, at this point, sir, the CNSs are in the bill, the Certified Nutrition Specialists. We are statutory siblings since 2002. So our groups are together, but most of us have master's degrees in nutrition-related fields. Most of us have supervised experience, proven competency through nationally vetted examinations, and continuing education requirements. To take groups like that and to combine a scope of practice that would include, and perhaps I'm sure that some of Brett's gyms have people that have qualifications in the physical arena portion of things, athletic trainers, majors in kinesiology, things like that. I think that group would be much better affiliated with the athletic trainers because that's where their real that's where the real connection is in that particular area. We support athletic trainers, we support CrossFit, if people want to do whatever. But we would never try and do that because we don't have the experience, education, or competency to do it. So what we're asking, and thank you for your support, but what we're asking is that these folks can practice regular, general, non-medical nutrition information, but leave the disease-related things to people that are educated, experienced, and have the competency to do it. Because if not, patients suffer and some die.
I just want you to, keep your thoughts and ideas open. We all know or should know that nutrition and strength are inextricably connected. Yep. And I don't want to push our trainers, that's the term I'm using, to the curb in nutrition because people that are coming to them expect them to get them big, muscularly, and small, fat-wise, and look cut, right? And they would be remiss, and it's even more now that they realize that intake is even more important than running 50 miles a day to get weight off. So we want to continue to use them in telling the story about health for Pennsylvanians and use them in a good way, not in a bad way. But I really appreciate your comments and thank you for the extended time.
Thank you. We have 3 more members in 5 minutes, so just warning everybody. Representative Kalonji.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. Thank you again. This is an excellent forum for this. I guess my first thing will be for Ms. Adams, of the 4,276 registered LDNs, are there a percentage of them that are affiliated with large gyms, CrossFit facilities, things like that? And also, while I'm saying that, I want to piggyback on what my colleague, Representative Lawrence, said. It's very important to get this definition right because being the obvious gym rat that I am, it's important that we get these folks. The first line of defense is coming in the door is at the gyms. The first time that a lot of folks are talking about nutrition is when they come into their CrossFit facility or they go into their gym. So I think it's just really important that we figure that out because I do not want to hold our gym folks responsible for being able to have a candid conversation with their clients. So that's important to me that we get that right as well.
Thank you so much for your question. I agree with you, and that I really agree with you because we need everyone to fight this battle. And that's why House Bill 1802 has those areas in the bill that covers non-medical weight loss and has many exceptions for individuals and professionals, teachers, health coaches, etc., that will work with individuals and help them avoid getting a disease. Once nutrition is associated with curing a disease, or maybe not totally curing, but helping to maintain a person, etc., then it goes into the scope of practice of the licensed dietitian nutritionist. And that's important because we want to protect that area for individuals that have the education, the experience, and the competency through a credentialing examination as the certified nutrition specialist and the registered dietitian nutritionist take certifying examinations. Our education is rigorous, unbelievably rigorous. Additionally, our experience, the practicum experiences, the internship is equally rigorous. I'm an acting director of our internship currently at LaSalle University. I will tell you that at LaSalle, we spend probably around 900 hours just in clinical dietetics. It is true that there are other areas that we learn about, but we are very well versed in medical nutrition therapy. Additionally, you were asking questions about, now I'm losing my train of thought. Additionally, you were asking questions about keeping everyone in the same tent, and I think this bill does just that. If it's read, it does just that. And I do agree with you that those definitions are important, and we have to get this right. Thank you.
Representative Brown, do you have a very quick question?
Okay, wait, no.
Question in like 30 seconds.
Thank you all for your testimony. I agree with the definition. And for me, for professional licensure, you know, I believe it should be clarity, honesty. And so when you look at when you're licensing something for the everyday person, are they going to know exactly what they're getting, exactly the service, have the confidence? I think sometimes we make it more difficult than it is, but that's exactly what I think about when I look at this type of issue. I want to know what I'm getting. I want to know what my people are getting. I want to know that they are trained and that there's no shenanigans going on. So that's number one. So I do think the definition needs to be right. For many members know that I was in the pharmaceutical world before. I sold a weight loss drug. You might know Xenical.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so this is quick. I promise it is. If you took the drug and you didn't have the dietary measures associated with it, you'd get a terrible side effect right through the body. And it was basically saying, the drug was saying, I'm doing my job and you're not. You're not doing the dietary. But I had a heck of a time finding dietary assistance with me, with my physicians, to make the patient succeed. And during that process, I realized how important dietary therapy with medical can be, the success and everything. But at that point, there was a shortage for me to find help. Can I just ask you that quick question? As we have a shortage with primary care and other physicians, do we have a shortage with registered dietitians currently? Is there anything going on that we should know about as we continue to look at this subject?
Actually, no. We are at full employment. There's no doubt about that. But what our programs are doing is expanding so once we attract those that are qualified and competent, they will be able to go on to get internships and supervised practice experiences in order to sit for the examination. One thing we've got to keep in mind, and I wrestle with this because I mentor students, and it's important to me to do that. But one thing we have to bear in mind is that the complexity of nutrition care that we provide today is completely different than it was 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, certain people were qualified to practice. Today, it's much more scientifically oriented. Our courses are side by side with pre-med students, with nursing students, pharmacy students, those hardcore sciences. And so we have to be careful that the people that we enroll are going to be able to capture the knowledge that's provided. And that's an issue that we can't deal with in this room because it goes back to preschool and preparation of kids. But we have full employment, but we do we are working for expansion because we know we're going to have to. It's one of the jobs. It's going to increase by 20% in the next 5 years. Thank you.
We are out of time. What I'd like to do is excuse members if they want to get to the floor. However, I'll remain for a few minutes. We do have one more question, but I don't want to hold members up, particularly if the speaker has already gavelled in. I don't know that at this point in time. So, Tom, if you have a very quick question.
Yeah, it is. My door's always open to talk about this, and we can put forth any amendments that are going to make this bill better. The question I have is for Brett. And out of the 220 gyms that you have here in Pennsylvania, how many licensed dietitians work for you?
I don't have that information offhand.
If you could get that to us, or how many of them have licensed dietitians, nutritionists, or CNSs, or LDNs? I'd like to know that information if I could.
Certainly.
Or for this whole committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We appreciate the 5 of you being here today. This has been very, very helpful, very informative. I think it's clear that we've got some work to do on this legislation, but there's a little bit of consensus here and there. So thank you again. I'm sure we'll be working with you in the weeks and months ahead to try to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.